The light in the luminous conclave was not merely illumination. It was memory, data, and the very substance of governance. It flowed in silent, crystalline rivers along the arching vaults of the chamber, a vast cavern carved from a single moon-sized geode. Within these currents of coherent photons pulsed the collective history of the Xylos Compact, a civilization of crystalline intellects who had long ago mastered the universe of order and logic. Yet today the light felt dissonant, its harmonious frequencies disturbed by a single, terrifying anomaly that defied every principle upon which their existence was founded. At the heart of the conclave, suspended in a sphere of gravitic force, a holographic projection flickered. It was a phantom, an impossibility made manifest for their tortured observation. It was the human warship. Grand Articulator Valerius, his own form a towering lattice of intricate, glowing filaments, felt the discordance as a physical ache in his resonant core. For cycles, the Compact had watched the nascent expansion of the species known as humanity. They were a biological curiosity, ephemeral beings of soft tissue and chaotic emotion, born from a muddy world of uncontrolled evolution. Their technology was primitive by Compact standards, their expansion slow and clumsy. They were deemed a negligible variable, a footnote in the grand, orderly calculus of the galaxy. Then this asterisk thing had appeared at the edge of their sovereign territory. The projection before him was a lie, a paradox that mocked the senses and shattered the bedrock of physics. The vessel was there, and it was not. Its energy signature was that of a fleet, yet its mass was singular. Its form shifted, phasing between a state of pristine wholeness and one of catastrophic destruction, flickering in and out of perceivable reality. The impossible warship, yet it existed. The sensor readings remain unchanged, Grand Articulator, came the precise, toneless voice of Strategos Kalen. His form, unlike Valerius's fluid and complex structure, was a rigid weaponized shard of obsidian crystal, honed by millennia of command over the Compact's defense flotillas. The object registers simultaneously at the periphery and near the core worlds. It is both inert and discharging weapons-grade energy. It is a warship of incomprehensible design, a direct and calculated assault not on our borders, but on our understanding of reality itself. It is a weapon of pure psychological terror. The Conclave, a silent assembly of the Compact's most ancient and powerful minds, absorbed Kalen's words. The light flowing through them shifted, its colors deepening to hues of concern and alarm. They were a people of data. They trusted what could be measured, what could be predicted. The human ship was immeasurable, unpredictable. It was chaos given form, and chaos was the philosophical enemy the Xylos Compact had spent eons containing. A weapon designed to break the mind before it breaks the hull, Kalen continued, his voice resonating with cold certainty. These humans, these soft-bodied anarchists, have devised a form of warfare that strikes at the core of our strength, logic. They know we would analyze, that we would seek to understand. And in our attempt we would find only paradox, contradiction, and madness. It is a brilliant, insidious strategy. I recommend an immediate, overwhelming response. We must sterilize the coordinates it occupies, all of them, with a null-field cascade. We must erase the equation before it can be solved. A different resonance filled the chamber, softer, more intricate. It was chronicler Lyra, her form a delicate web of opalescent crystal that seemed to capture and hold the light of distant stars. She was the keeper of histories, the weaver of patterns that others, in their rigid focus, often missed. Strategos, your fear speaks with the clarity of a sharpened blade, but it may be pointing at a shadow. We have never known humanity to be insidious. Reckless, perhaps. Ambitious, certainly. But their expansion has followed a predictable, if inefficient, pattern. They build, they explore, they communicate. The data we have on them, sparse as it is, suggests a species driven by curiosity, not by a desire to inflict metaphysical torment. Curiosity can forge new weapons, chronicler, Kalen countered, his form emitting a low, dangerous thrum. Perhaps their explorations led them to a technology they barely understand, and they now wield it like a child playing with a star hammer. Or worse, they understand it perfectly, and this display is a deliberate declaration. They are showing us that the rules of the universe, as we know them, no longer apply to them. That is not an act of curiosity. That is an act of dominance. Valerius allowed the debate to flow, his own mind a storm of conflicting calculations. Kalen's logic was sound from a tactical perspective. A threat that cannot be understood must be eliminated before it can. The risk of inaction was the potential dissolution of their ordered society, a descent into the very chaos they abhorred. But Lyra's point was equally valid. The Compact's only true failings in its long history had come from moments of arrogance, from assuming they understood the motivations of younger, more volatile species. They had made assumptions before, and those assumptions had led to conflicts that, while ultimately won, had left scars on the galactic fabric. He focused again on the ghostly image of the ship. It was a predator, to be sure. Its lines were sharp, aggressive, hinting at immense power held in reserve. But as it flickered between states, Valerius's ancient consciousness perceived something else beneath the terror. There was a strange elegance to it, a rhythm to its phasing that was not entirely random. It was like watching a complex thought form, a process of becoming rather than a static state of being. Was it aggression, or was it something else entirely, something so far beyond their experience that they were misinterpreting it as a threat? The humans had sent no demands, no declarations of war. There was only the ship and a profound, deafening silence. "We are a civilization of 1,000,000 cycles," Valerius finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of his long existence, silencing the chamber. The light itself seemed to bend toward him, listening. "We have faced down singularities, navigated the great voids between galactic arms, and encoded the laws of physics into the very matrix of our being. And now, we are brought to the edge of panic by a single vessel from a species that has barely learned to walk among the stars. We are not afraid of the ship. We are afraid of what it represents, a question we cannot answer." He turned his focus toward Kalen. "Strategos, a null-field cascade would be an act of total war, predicated on an assumption. If we are wrong, if this is not a weapon but a form of communication we do not comprehend, we will have revealed ourselves as fearful tyrants, not the guardians of order we claim to be. We would become the very chaos we seek to destroy." His gaze then shifted to Lyra. "And Chronicler, your hope is a valuable counterpoint, but hope is not a strategy. We cannot simply wait for the paradox to explain itself. The presence of this entity is a disruption to the cosmic order. Its mere existence destabilizes the region." Silence descended upon the conclave once more, a heavy, expectant stillness. The impossible warship continued its silent, ghostly dance in the center of the room, a monument to their ignorance. Valerius felt the immense pressure of his position. The fate of the compact, and perhaps the future of their relationship with this strange, unpredictable species, rested on his next decision. He had to choose between the certainty of violence and the uncertainty of patience. He had to weigh the known against the unknowable. It was then that a new stream of light, pure and unadulterated, pierced the conclave from a high-data conduit. It was a communication not from their own fleets, but from the source of their anxiety. It was from the humans. The message was not encoded with threats or laden with ultimatums. It contained no complex algorithms of dominance. It was a simple, elegant stream of universal mathematics, followed by a set of spatial coordinates and a single, repeating concept, translated with startling accuracy into the core logic of the compact: invitation, dialogue, understanding. The conclave erupted in a cacophony of dissonant light. Kalen's form pulsed with a dark, furious energy. A trap. "They display an impossible weapon and then invite us to approach. They mean to capture or destroy our envoys to demonstrate their power without question. Or," Lyra countered, her opalescent form glowing with a cautious optimism, "they are aware of how we perceive their vessel and wish to clarify. They are offering us the one thing we value most: data." The human message was the tipping point. It was an act of profound confidence or profound foolishness. They had revealed the location of a meeting point, a place where they would presumably be vulnerable. They had offered conversation in the face of a potential military response of overwhelming scale. It was, in itself, another paradox. A species capable of creating a ship that defied physics should not need to talk. They could simply act. Valerius made his decision. The path of logic was not always the path of least resistance. True understanding required risk. True order was not the absence of chaos, but its integration into a higher harmony. "Strategos Kalen, you will not deploy the null field. You will place our fleets on high alert, a shield against any potential treachery. But it will be a shield, not a sword. Chronicler Lyra, you will assemble a delegation. You will lead it yourself. We will accept their invitation. We will go to these coordinates and we will listen. Seek the data we lack, and we will show this young race that the Xylos Compact is governed by reason, not by fear." His final words resonated through the chamber, setting the very crystal of the conclave into a new, determined hum. The impossible warship still flickered in the holographic display, its mystery unsolved. But now it was no longer just a symbol of terror. It was a gateway, a question that had at last been given the promise of an answer. As the delegates prepared and the great fleets moved into silent, watchful positions, Valerius remained alone in the conclave, his ancient mind contemplating the nature of these humans. What kind of beings built a ghost to haunt the stars, only to then offer a hand in friendship? The possibilities were more unsettling than any weapon he could have conceived. The journey to the designated coordinates was an exercise in supreme tension. The Xylo's diplomatic vessel, the Stellara Asterisk, was a marvel of compact engineering, a sleek crystalline spire that moved through the void with silent grace. It was escorted by a contingent of Kalen's warships, their obsidian forms hanging back at a respectful but strategic distance, a silent promise of retribution should the humans prove treacherous. Chronicler Lyra stood on the observation deck, her form shimmering softly in the starlight. Around her, the other delegates, linguists, physicists, and cultural analysts, maintained a professional calm that barely concealed the anxiety rippling through their energy fields. They were flying toward a ghost. They were preparing to speak with a paradox. Lyra's own core resonated with a complex mixture of trepidation and intellectual excitement. For her entire existence, she had studied the past, finding patterns in the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars. Humanity was a new pattern, one that did not conform to any previous model. They were a species of contradictions, fragile in form yet resilient in spirit, short-lived yet possessed of a startlingly deep sense of history and legacy, emotional yet capable of profound acts of logic and sacrifice. The impossible warship was the ultimate expression of that contradiction. As they approached the specified coordinates in the deep, starless void of an interstellar nebula, their sensors remained eerily silent. There was nothing here. No ship, no energy signature, no gravitational distortion. The space was utterly, primordially empty. A low hum of alarm went through the asterisk Stellara asterisk. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances. Was this the trap Kalen had predicted? A lure into an ambush? Chronicler, the ship's captain resonated, his tone flat with professional concern. We have reached the destination. There is nothing present. Long-range scans show no sign of the anomalous vessel at any of its previously recorded locations. It appears to have vanished. Lyra did not respond immediately. She closed her external sensors, focusing her consciousness inward, feeling the subtle vibrations of spacetime itself. She had studied the limited human data, their art, their philosophies. One concept had resonated with her deeply, the idea of the pause before the storm, the held breath before the performance. They were not a people of instantaneous action. They appreciated ceremony. They understood the power of anticipation. Hold your position, Captain, she finally commanded. Maintain readiness, but do not broadcast any signals of aggression. Simply wait. And so they waited. The silence stretched, thick and absolute. The obsidian warships of their escort hung like patient predators in the dark. The tension on the asterisk Stellara asterisk S bridge became a tangible force, a pressure on the very structure of their crystalline forms. For what felt like an eternity, there was only the void. Then it began. It was not an arrival in the conventional sense. There was no flash of light, no tearing of spacetime. Instead, reality itself seemed too thin. The empty space before them began to shimmer, as if seen through a heat haze. A low, subaudible hum vibrated through the hull of the asterisk Stellara asterisk, a note so deep it felt like it was coming from the bones of the universe. The holographic displays on the bridge, which had shown only empty blackness, began to flicker with impossible data. The human warship was suddenly there, and not there, its ghostly form resolving and dissolving, its energy signature fluctuating from 0 to that of a supernova. But this time was different. The flickering began to slow. The chaotic dance of its quantum state began to coalesce. With a final, silent shudder that seemed to warp the starlight around it, the impossible warship became possible. It solidified. It became real. And it was more magnificent and terrifying than any projection could have conveyed. It was immense, a blade of polished, midnight dark metal that seemed to drink the light of the distant stars. Its design was stark, minimalist, yet exuded a sense of latent power that made the compact's most formidable warships look like primitive toys. There were no visible weapon ports, no glowing engine nacelles. It was a seamless, perfect object, a scar on the face of the void, and it was utterly, completely silent. The chaotic energy readings vanished, replaced by the steady, calm hum of a fully operational, stable vessel. A new signal reached them, clear and precise. It was the same universal mathematical language as before, but it carried a new message. Welcome, Chronicler Lyra of the Xylo's Compact. We are the human vessel Asterisk Odyssey. We are pleased you have come. Please prepare to receive a docking corridor. We are unarmed. The final 2 words hung in the air, a statement of such audacious confidence that it bordered on absurdity. Unarmed? The vessel that had shattered their understanding of physics. Lyra felt a wave of awe wash over her, quieting the last vestiges of her fear. This was not a prelude to war. This was a demonstration of mastery. They had not just built a paradox, they had tamed it. Open a channel to the fleet, Lyra commanded, her voice steady. Inform Strategos Kalen that we are proceeding, the humans are receiving us, and they claim to be unarmed. She could almost feel Kalen's disbelief across the light years. Acknowledge their message, Captain, accept the docking corridor. The process of docking was as surreal as the ship's arrival. A section of the Odyssey *S seamless hull simply dissolved, reforming into a telescoping corridor that extended with frictionless precision to meet the *Stellara*. There was no sound, no vibration, only a perfect, silent unfolding of advanced engineering. Lyra and her delegation proceeded into the corridor, their crystalline forms gliding over the softly lit floor. The air inside was breathable, a carefully balanced mix of nitrogen and oxygen, maintained at a temperature and pressure perfectly suited for biological life. The thoughtfulness of the gesture was not lost on them. They emerged into a vast, cavernous space that defied all their expectations. This was no warship's bridge. There were no command thrones, no weapons consoles, no tactical displays. The chamber was a soaring atrium, filled with lush, green vegetation clinging to elegantly curved walls. A gentle, warm light simulating that of a yellow sun filled the space. The air smelled of soil, water, and growing things. In the center of the atrium, a human was waiting for them. She was small, impossibly fragile by their standards, her form composed of soft tissues and clad in a simple, dark blue uniform. Her hair was the color of silver, and her face, though marked by the passage of time, held a gaze of profound calm and intelligence. She stood with her hands clasped gently behind her back, her posture one of relaxed welcome, not of martial authority. "Chronicler Lyra," she said, her voice soft but clear, perfectly rendered by the tiny translation device she wore. "I am Ambassador Evelyn Reed. On behalf of the Terran Alliance, I welcome you to the Odyssey. Thank you for having the courage to come." Lyra and her delegation came to a halt, taking in the scene. The tranquil garden, the unarmed woman, the sheer, peaceful absurdity of it all. This was the heart of the machine that had terrified a galactic superpower. "Ambassador Reed," Lyra resonated, her own translators converting her harmonic speech into human language. "Your vessel, it has caused a significant disruption. Our compact believed it to be a weapon of unimaginable power." Evelyn Reed offered a small, sad smile. "I understand, and for that we are truly sorry. The disruption was an unavoidable and deeply regrettable side effect of our transit. The Odyssey is not a warship. It is a vessel of exploration, a laboratory, a moving observatory. Its purpose is not to conquer, but to understand." This was the moment of revelation, the point where the entire crisis would either resolve or escalate into open conflict. One of the physicists in Lyra's delegation stepped forward, his crystalline form resonating with barely contained skepticism. "Ambassador, with respect, what we observed is not a side effect of any known form of propulsion. Your vessel appeared to exist in a state of quantum superposition on a macroscopic scale. It violated causality. Such a phenomenon could only be weaponized. It is the ultimate deterrent, the ultimate tool of terror." Evelyn Reed nodded, her expression patient, as if she were a teacher explaining a complex concept to a promising student. "You are correct in your assessment of the phenomenon, but you are mistaken in your assumption of its purpose. Please, allow me to show you." She gestured for them to follow, leading them from the atrium into a long, curving corridor. The walls were not metal, but a form of smart glass that currently displayed a breathtaking, real-time view of the nebula outside. They passed other humans, scientists and engineers in similar uniforms, who had their work to nod respectfully at the crystalline beings, their faces showing not fear or hostility, but a quiet, professional curiosity. There was no military presence, no armed guards. The ship felt less like a fortress and more like a university. They entered a vast spherical chamber that was clearly the heart of the ship. In the center, suspended in a containment field of shimmering gold, was a sphere of roiling, chaotic energy, a miniature, captured star that pulsed with unimaginable power. Around the chamber, holographic displays showed incredibly complex equations and quantum waveform charts that made even the compact's top physicists pause in awe. "This," Evelyn said, her voice filled with a quiet reverence, "is the core of our quantum entanglement drive, the QED. It is how the Odyssey travels. We do not fly through space in the traditional sense. We do not bend or tear spacetime. Instead, we perform what you might call a location swap." She pointed to a display. "In simplified terms, the drive entangles the entire quantum state of this ship with a pre-calculated set of coordinates in empty space. Then, through an immense expenditure of energy, it forces a decoherence. The wave function of the ship collapses, but it collapses at the destination, not the origin. We cease to exist here and begin to exist there, instantly." Lyra felt a profound shock. The concept was so elegant, so audacious, it bordered on a form of cosmic magic. But the state we observed, the flickering, the superposition, that, Evelyn explained, is the ship in transit. For the duration of the jump, which can last for several minutes from an external observer's perspective, the Odyssey does not exist in a single defined state. It exists as a probabilistic cloud, a wave of potentiality spread across its entire trajectory. Our quantum signature is smeared across space and time. Your sensors were not malfunctioning. They were accurately reporting an event that defies classical physics. They were detecting the ghost of a possibility, a ship that was everywhere and nowhere at once. She gestured to another part of the display, which showed simulations of energy discharges. The weapon's fire you detected was residual chronoton radiation bleeding off from the wave function's collapse. It's a form of quantum wake. Harmless, but I can see how it would be alarming when misinterpreted. The physicist delegate from Lyra's team slowly rotated his multifaceted form, a crystalline expression of stunned comprehension. "You have weaponized quantum uncertainty," he whispered, his voice full of disbelief. "No," Evelyn corrected him gently but firmly. "We have harnessed it, and we have deliberately and with great effort chosen not to weaponize it. That is a critical distinction." She turned to face Lyra directly, her calm eyes holding a deep, serious gravity. "Chronicler, my people are young, and we have made many mistakes. Our own history is filled with violence. We know the temptation of power better than most. When we developed the QED, our first and most passionate debate was about its potential as a weapon. A ship that cannot be targeted, that can appear anywhere, that can deliver a payload and vanish before the light of the explosion even reaches its enemy. It would be the ultimate instrument of war. We understood that, and we rejected it." She swept her arm around the chamber, at the scientists, at the humming core, at the peaceful starlight visible through the walls. "We made a choice. We encoded ethical constraints into the very heart of the drive's operational matrix. It cannot be activated in the gravity well of a star or planet. It cannot be used to transport weaponry above a certain energy threshold. The Odyssey and its sister ships are legally and technologically bound to be instruments of peace and exploration. We learned, through great pain, that some power is too vast to be used for destruction. To do so would not be to conquer our enemies, but to annihilate our own soul." The silence that followed her words was more profound than the emptiness of the void outside. Lyra felt the truth of the ambassador's statement resonating within her own core. It was a logic that the compact, in its cold pursuit of order, had perhaps forgotten. It was the logic of restraint, the wisdom of choosing not to act, even when one has the power to do so. These chaotic, emotional, biological beings had faced a temptation of ultimate power and had turned away from it, not out of fear, but out of principle. "The impossible warship," Lyra finally resonated, the name feeling foolish on her translators now. It was never a warship at all. It was our own fear reflected back at us. "Fear is the great misunderstanding between species," Evelyn Reed replied softly. "It is the lens through which we view the unknown. We hoped that by inviting you here, by showing you the truth, we could begin to build a bridge across that void, not with technology, but with trust." The delegation was speechless. They had come expecting to confront a terrifying enemy, a species of warmongers who had torn up the rulebook of the universe. Instead, they had found philosophers. Scientists who had looked into the deepest, most complex secrets of reality and had emerged with not a sword, but an olive branch. The revelation was so total, so utterly contrary to their expectations, that it forced a complete reevaluation of everything they thought they knew about humanity. The humans were not chaotic. They were, in their own unique way, the most ordered and disciplined species the Compact had ever encountered. Their order was not external, enforced by rigid law, but internal, a moral compass forged in the fires of their own tumultuous history. Lyra knew that the report she would bring back to the Conclave would change everything. It would shatter Kalen's militaristic worldview and vindicate her own cautious optimism. But more than that, it would present the Xylos Compact with a challenge far greater than any war. The challenge of admitting they were wrong, and the humility to learn from a species they had so profoundly underestimated. Standing in the heart of the Odyssey, surrounded by the quiet hum of a technology born of genius and wisdom, Lyra knew that the age of the Compact's solitary, arrogant order was over. A new age, one of partnership and shared discovery, was about to begin. The return of the *Stellara* to the luminous conclave was met with a silence charged with immense anticipation. The entire ruling body of the Xylos Compact was assembled, their crystalline forms arrayed in the vast geode chamber, the light of their collective consciousness pulsing with a nervous energy. Strategos Kalen stood like a monolith of obsidian, his posture rigid, prepared for a report of treachery and the order to finally unleash his fleets. Grand Articulator Valerius hung at the center, his intricate form radiating a tense calm, awaiting the data that would shape the future of his civilization. Chronicler Lyra entered the chamber alone. She moved to the center beneath the suspended holographic projector and paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. She did not need to speak. Instead, she opened a direct data link, transmitting her memories, her experiences, the full unvarnished truth of her encounter aboard the Odyssey. The conclave watched in stunned silence as the images and sensations flooded their shared consciousness. They saw the tranquil arboretum that served as a receiving hall. They heard the calm, measured voice of Ambassador Evelyn Reed. They saw the peaceful, studious humans, beings of soft flesh who moved with a purpose that was not martial, but intellectual. They toured the ship of marvels, not a warship, but a mobile university. And finally, they were brought into the heart of the machine, to the core of the quantum entanglement drive, and they heard the ambassador's explanation. The story of a species that had discovered ultimate power and had consciously, deliberately, chosen the path of restraint. The impact on the conclave was seismic. The flowing light within the chamber flickered and swirled in chaotic emotional patterns that the compact had not displayed in millennia. It was the light of disbelief, of awe, of a profound, shattering recalculation of reality. The impossible warship was a ghost not of human aggression, but of their own Xylo's paranoia. They had prepared for a monster and had been met by a sage. When the transmission ended, the silence was absolute. Every member of the conclave was turned inward, processing the monumental implications of what they had just learned. It was Strategos Kalen who broke the stillness. He moved forward, his heavy obsidian form gliding over the crystalline floor until he stood before Lyra. For a long moment he was motionless, the embodiment of a shattered worldview. Then, in a gesture of profound humility that no one in the chamber had ever witnessed from him, he lowered the sharpened crest of his form. "I was wrong," Kalen's voice resonated, stripped of its usual hard certainty. It was quiet, heavy, and raw. "My logic was based on a flawed premise. I saw a new sword and assumed it would be wielded. I could not, conceive of a species that would forge such a thing and then choose to keep it sheathed. My analysis was incomplete. I saw only the weapon, not the hand that held it, or the mind that refused to clench it into a fist." He turned his form to address Valerius and the entire conclave. "I formally retract my recommendation for military action. I advocate for immediate diplomatic engagement. We have nothing to teach this species about power, and everything to learn from them about wisdom." The act of contrition from the compact's most hardened military leader sent a final, conclusive ripple through the assembly. The dissonant lights resolved into a single, harmonious chorus of unified color. The debate was over. The fear had been purged, replaced by a deep and humbling respect. Valerius felt a sense of relief so profound it was as if a mountain's weight had been lifted from his core structure. He had led his people to the edge of a catastrophic mistake, and they had been pulled back by the quiet, ethical strength of a species they had dismissed as primitive. "Your words honor the spirit of truth, Strategos," Valerius declared, his voice full of solemn gravity. "Let this be a lesson to us all. Order without wisdom is merely tyranny. Logic without empathy is a sterile equation. The humans have shown us a more complete path." He addressed the entire conclave. "We will not just engage in diplomacy. We will seek an alliance, a partnership. Their understanding of the fluid, uncertain nature of reality is a perfect complement to our mastery of its rigid, crystalline structures. Together, the Xylos Compact and the Terran Alliance could usher in a new era of understanding for the entire galaxy." A universal pulse of assent flowed through the chamber. The decision was unanimous. They would reach out to the humans, not as superiors, not as wary rivals, but as equals, as potential partners in a grander cosmic exploration. The impossible warship, once a symbol of their deepest fears, had become the catalyst for their greatest evolution. As the formal communication was being drafted, a priority message arrived. It was from Ambassador Reed, a personal transmission to Valerius and the assembled conclave. Her image appeared on the main holographic display, the same calm, intelligent face they had seen in Lyra's memories. But this time her expression was different. It was still calm, but it was overlaid with a deep, somber gravity. The faint smile was gone, replaced by a look of profound seriousness. "Grand Articulator Valerius," she began, her voice steady but carrying an immense weight. "I am glad our meeting with Chronicler Lyra was fruitful. We believe our two peoples have much to offer one another, but I must confess that our presence in your region of space was not an accident of exploration. We came here for a specific and urgent reason. There is something more you must know." A hush fell over the conclave. What more could there be? The revelation about the Odyssey was already more than they could easily process. "The quantum entanglement drive is more than just a method of propulsion," Reed continued. "It is the most sensitive observational tool ever created. By analyzing the probabilistic echoes of our own transits, we can perceive the deepest structures of spacetime. We can read the faint, quantum signatures left behind by ancient cosmic events. We built the Odyssey to investigate an anomaly we had detected at the edge of the galaxy, a pattern that our previous instruments could not resolve. We built it to look into a great and terrible silence." The holographic display behind her changed. It was no longer her face, but a vast, three-dimensional map of their spiral galaxy. It was a familiar image to all in the conclave. But then, a section of the map, far out on the intergalactic fringe, was highlighted. Data streams began to flow from it, human in origin but translated into Xylo's schematics. "For millennia, astronomers have known of the Great Void, an area between galaxies that is unusually empty," Reed said, her voice dropping lower. "It was assumed to be a natural feature of cosmic formation. It is not. It is growing." The map zoomed in. They saw star systems, entire clusters on the edge of this void. And then they watched, through a time-lapse simulation built from the Odyssey *S quantum sensor data, as something horrifying occurred. The star systems did not die in fire. They did not explode. They simply ceased. One by one they winked out of existence, not just the light, but their gravitational signatures, their quantum auras, their very imprint on the fabric of reality. It was not destruction. It was erasure. A creeping, inexorable tide of absolute nothingness that was slowly, patiently eating the galaxy. "It is not a fleet," Reed stated, her words landing like physical blows. "It is not an empire or a weapon. We do not believe it to be alive in any sense we can comprehend. It is a phenomenon, a dynamic spreading flaw in reality itself, a zone of ontological decay. Where it passes, the laws of physics break down and existence itself is unwoven. The universe is being unmade." The light in the conclave dimmed, the collective shock and horror of the assembly draining its brilliance. The fear they had felt from the Odyssey was a child's fright in the dark compared to this. This was an existential dread, a cold, absolute terror that struck at the heart of their ordered, logical universe. "There is one more thing," Ambassador Reed said, her expression now one of shared, grim purpose. "Within the quantum foam, buried beneath the noise of the cosmos, we detected a signal. It is not a communication. It is a scar, an echo. The last desperate cry of the last civilization that encountered this phenomenon billions of years ago, a people so advanced they were able to encode their final warning into the very structure of spacetime." The human display translated the ancient, fragmented signal. It was not made of words, but of pure mathematical concepts, a language that any advanced intelligence could eventually decipher. The concepts were simple and utterly chilling. "It comes, the silence, the unraveling. We are the last. Do not fight it. You cannot. Flee the light. The pattern is broken, all becomes null." The message ended. Ambassador Reed's face returned to the screen. She looked out at the silent, stunned, crystalline beings of the Xylos compact, and her expression was no longer that of a diplomat from a young race, but of a fellow traveler staring into the same abyss. "The Odyssey was not built to be a warship," she said, her voice quiet but ringing with a profound, unshakable resolve. "It was built to be a scout. We came here not to intimidate you, but to see if we were alone in our knowledge of this threat. We came seeking allies. The impossible warship was never intended to fight you. We were hoping that it might one day fight with *U. Grand Articulator Valerius stared at the map, at the creeping, silent decay that was advancing toward them from the cold, dark void. The political squabbles, the pride of his civilization, the fear of a single, misunderstood vessel. It all seemed so small now, so insignificant in the face of this ultimate, final truth. The universe was not a safe, orderly place that could be perfectly understood and controlled. It was a fragile structure, and it was fraying at the edges. He looked at the image of the human ambassador, a being of soft flesh and fleeting life, a representative of a species that had looked upon the face of cosmic annihilation and had not despaired. They had not fled. They had built a ship of impossible science and had crossed the void not to run, but to find companions to stand with them at the end of all things. A new light began to dawn in the luminous conclave. It was not the light of fear, nor the light of arrogance. It was a different color entirely, one they had not seen in eons. It was the clear, bright, and terrible light of a shared purpose, a unity forged in the face of extinction. The impossible warship, yet it existed, and now, at last, they understood why it had to. It was not a weapon. It was a promise. a testament to a species that believed that even in the face of the ultimate void, the answer was not to hide but to stand together and to hold the line.